I'm reading this article from my blog. Link is in the description. 5 lessons I have learned after 6 years of speaking in tongues. Before I get into the article, a quick mention. I have a shop selling t-shirts, capes, hoodies, and long-sleeved shirts with custom speaking in tongues quotes. I put these speaking in tongues quotes on clothes to help pass different messages about speaking in tongues without having to open your mouth. And of course, it also goes a long way to support this work financially. You never know who will benefit from the message that is printed on your t-shirt or hoodie. Get one for yourself, or you can buy for a friend who speaks in tongues. Link to the shop is in the description. It has been 6 years since I received the gift of speaking in tongues. It doesn't feel like a long time, but I'm amazed at the number of things I have discovered. Prior to receiving the gift of speaking in tongues, I didn't know much about it, except what is written in the Bible. But after 6 years of speaking in tongues, I know that what the Bible mentions is only the tip of the iceberg. I have become like the Queen of Sheba when she visited King Solomon and confessed that what she had seen and experienced surpassed the report she had had. If you have been speaking in tongues for less than 6 years, these lessons I have learned should help you know what to expect. If you have been speaking in tongues for more than 6 years, I believe you'll resonate with my experience. Obviously, I cannot cover all the lessons I have learned in this article. Speaking in tongues is a journey, and I'm still learning new lessons every day. With the time God has given me, I will do my best to share all the lessons I learn as they come. For now, I have compiled the following 5 lessons. 5 lessons I have learned after 6 years of speaking in tongues. 1. Speaking in tongues for long matters a lot. Speaking in tongues will get you any breakthrough you want. The catch is how much time you spend speaking in tongues. 2 people can have totally different experiences when they speak in tongues if they do it for different durations. I have been close to my friends who received the gift of speaking in tongues around the same time I received the gift, but not all of us can confidently say we have received breakthroughs as a result of speaking in tongues. I'm grateful to God that I've experienced countless breakthroughs as a result of speaking in tongues, but some of my friends have not had the same experience. I attribute the difference to the time spent speaking in tongues. From what I have observed, those who have been consistent in speaking in tongues have convincing testimonies of what God has done for them. Those who spoke in tongues in their leisure time have nothing to testify of. The Bible affirms this truth. We are told that whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. The Bible also assures us in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, that everyone will reap what he sows. I would have felt guilty that some of my friends have not experienced the power of speaking in tongues, but I know it was their choice. Spending more time speaking in tongues matters a lot. The result of speaking in tongues consistently for long versus speaking in tongues occasionally are distinct like day and night. The realization has made me double down on speaking in tongues. I used to ask some of my friends to attend night vigils with me so that we'd speak in tongues together, but they will refuse to show up. After learning this lesson, I made it my responsibility to speak in tongues consistently, regardless of whether my friends will join me or not. It is certainly paying off, and I'm glad that God rewards everyone according to their hard work and commitment. 2. Speaking in tongues is different at different times of the day. There is an infamous debate among believers, with some saying the hour you pray doesn't matter, while others say it matters. After 6 years of speaking in tongues, I have learned that speaking in tongues at different times of the day matters. I have written an article before about speaking in tongues at night, and I explain in the article why it is special. In the early days of speaking in tongues, it won't matter whether you speak in tongues during the day or at night. But as you grow in the gift, time of the day will become an important factor. I also realized that speaking in tongues is easier at sunrise and sunset compared to daytime. At first, I thought it was a random experience, but over time I adjusted my prayer time to align with sunrise and sunset. The Bible hints about these two periods when it mentions the case of Daniel, who used to pray 3 times a day. We are not told exactly that it was morning, noon, and evening, but of course, that was most likely the case. I have prayed during other times of the day, but it wasn't as easy as during sunrise or sunset. I'm not setting any rules here, but if you want to test it yourself, do it. It works best for me, and I believe it is not just my experience, but a spiritually backed phenomena. 3. Speaking in tongues is an anchor in difficult seasons. If you are a believer, difficult seasons are guaranteed. God allows us to go through difficult seasons for various reasons. Most of the time, it is to test us, but sometimes it is punishment for our foolishness. For whatever reasons you go through a difficult season, one thing is clear. Speaking in tongues will be an anchor. The Bible explicitly asks those who are in trouble to pray in James chapter 5 verse 13. We are also told on the night Jesus was arrested that he was in distress and he prayed fervently. We are not told that he spoke in tongues, but of course we know that speaking in tongues is how the Holy Spirit helps us pray. In other words, if any of us is in trouble, God expects him to pray. But because praying is difficult in times of trouble, speaking in tongues comes in handy. Over the 6 years I have been speaking in tongues, I have sailed through difficult seasons by speaking in tongues. Speaking in tongues doesn't necessarily make difficult seasons easier, but it gives you hope. An anchor doesn't stop the boat from swaying, but it guarantees that the boat won't be carried away by the waves. If you are consistent in speaking in tongues when difficult seasons come, you will have something to hold on to. 4. Speaking in tongues becomes easier and enjoyable with time. If you asked me in my first year of speaking in tongues if I had the gift of speaking in tongues, I would have hesitated to answer. That is because speaking in tongues didn't feel any special, and I had a hard time understanding how a gift of the Holy Spirit can miss to be enjoyable. But as I persisted in speaking in tongues, I began experiencing joy and fulfillment. Finally, speaking in tongues felt like a gift from God. Nobody had oriented me about this experience, but I'm grateful that God helped me sail through the difficult part. Anytime I talk to someone who is starting out in the gift of speaking in tongues, I do my best to let the person know that the early days are going to be tough. Some people may not experience the toughness in the early days of speaking in tongues, but that is the exception, not the rule. It is better to prepare for a difficult season and not experience it than hope for a smooth sail than experience trouble. I learned that I should not expect to enjoy speaking in tongues in the early days. Any enjoyment in the early stages of speaking in tongues should come as a surprise. When you finally start experiencing the sweetness of speaking in tongues, you won't need anyone to tell you how sweet it is. 5. Speaking in tongues is more mysterious than what we are told. The 5th lesson I have learned about speaking in tongues in my 6 years of practicing the gift is its mysterious nature. When I received the gift, I expected it to be an average experience. And sure enough, it was an average experience in the early days. But as I kept practicing it, I realized speaking in tongues is deeper than what people say. Today, I am confident that speaking in tongues is mysterious beyond explanation. Most of the experiences I have had about speaking in tongues can't be expressed in words. I will just say I felt great peace, but I wish someone could experience that peace. I have discovered many things about speaking in tongues that I never thought were possible. Nowadays, when I hear a man of God talking about speaking in tongues, I know he's only scratching the surface. The true experiences of speaking in tongues are beyond what words can describe. These experiences baffle you regardless of how much you have invested in your spiritual life. There is a lot about speaking in tongues waiting to be discovered by serious believers who are hungry for God. This is also why I no longer bother when someone wants to argue with me about speaking in tongues. I don't let their narrow spiritual reasoning distract me from the deep mysteries that God is willing to reveal. You can learn from people about speaking in tongues, but nobody will teach you about speaking in tongues more than your own experience. I understand most people's encounters regarding speaking in tongues primarily because I have experienced them too. It is easier to say, yeah, I have experienced that too, than to explain an experience. If someone says he spoke in tongues and saw a bright light and felt weak afterwards, I remember a time I had a similar experience. Though I may not fully describe what it was, at least the person will know he is on the right path. Therefore, expect deeper experiences when speaking in tongues beyond what you've heard men of God talk about. Lessons I have learned after 6 years of speaking in tongues. Conclusion. Speaking in tongues is a gift of the Holy Spirit with unspeakable dimensions. You will learn many lessons the more you soak in the gift. The above lessons were the ones I could remember. As I mentioned before, learning never stops, and that includes learning about speaking in tongues. When I set out to share about speaking in tongues, I was concerned there was too little information. I thought I would run out of ideas, but surely God knew there was a lot to be covered. I hope you find these articles helpful. Peace.